Hello, this is Rick Jordan, the Church Resources Coordinator for the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship of North Carolina. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on shame, and our presenter today is Libby Johnson. Libby is a native of Wilmington, North Carolina, and a lifetime member of Winter Park Baptist Church. She graduated from Campbell University Divinity School in May 2016 with her Master of Divinity degree. Libby was ordained in November 2016 by Winter Park Baptist Church. Libby enjoys speaking for conferences and retreats. She often develops and leads weekend retreats. And since her graduation, Libby has become a certified Christian leadership coach and an associate certified coach. She is a member of the International Coaching Federation. Today's webinar will begin with Libby's presentation. And if you have questions or comments to make, you can enter them at the question box at any time. It is at the bottom of your screen. If you'll scroll with your cursor to the bottom of the screen, there will be a box that says Q&A. You can enter your question or comment there, and I will ask them at the end of her presentation. So feel free to put a question or comment in at any time. Thank you for joining us in today's webinar. And a reminder that today's webinar will be recorded and will be stored in the CBF of North Carolina Virtual Resource Library on our website. Libby, we welcome you.
Thank you. Appreciate that so much. All right, so we're ready to get started. Let me share my screen with you all. Okay, so thank you so much, Rick.
Yeah.
Our topic today is what is shame and how do we get a grip on it? Who will benefit from this today? Several people. Anyone who has ever struggled with shame, anyone who needs clarity on this topic, also ministry leaders who need a resource for their congregation, and also those individuals who want to overcome shame. And today we will cover the following things. We will gain an understanding about what shame is and how to recognize it. We will learn how to recognize your shame triggers. We will learn about shame resilience, and we will identify some of the first steps to overcoming shame. You might ask yourself, why would I choose to talk about shame? Well, honestly, I didn't choose it. I feel like God did. The reality is that I have lived this years, and I have lived through the recovery phase, and it has led me to overcoming shame. You see, God called me to this work in 2016, and although it has taken me a while to get to this place, He has been doing this work in me for years. My life had been marked with many difficult times, and there was a time when I found myself spiraling downward. Of course, I didn't know that shame was causing this downward spiral. Shame had a tight grip on me at that time. And thankfully, I found help through a therapist who helped me to learn techniques to overcome my shame, to see where I was, and to identify many false beliefs that I had about myself so that I could work on the changes necessary. You see, my self-esteem had suffered and my insecurities were great at the time, but I found a way out. Upon my graduation from Campbell Divinity School in 2016, I began sensing God calling me to this work. It hasn't been easy, but it has been rewarding. God has restored many relationships in my life, and today there is living proof of that on a regular basis. So I am here today sharing this information with you because it is the call on my life, and also because helping people overcome shame is what makes my heart sing, as a friend and mentor of mine has said to me. When we get into the topic of shame, there are many misconceptions about this. This is not one size fits all. This is also not a quick fix, and it is not easy. You must have some desire to do the work, and if you do, then this material will help you. A couple of other thoughts about this. My results did not come easy, as I said before. but knowledge is key. The results you get are entirely yours, and you do not have to go at it alone. I would be honored to walk you through it. So, does this sound like you? Do you feel less than or not enough? Are you constantly hearing negative self-talk? Are you suffering from low self-esteem, body appearance issues, or perfectionism? Do you know you are a child of God's and yet you continue to put yourself down and compare yourself to others? Do you feel like you may never get out of the pit? Do you believe that you can't forgive or be forgiven? Do you feel like you just want to hide? If you feel like you are stuck and you can't move forward, then shame may have a grip on you. Brene Brown says that virtually no one can escape shame, but there is a way to build resilience and learn to overcome. So, what is shame? These answers here are a combination of the book answers that I studied and also brainstorming from a session at a recent retreat. Shame is feeling less than or not enough, embarrassed or feeling that something is wrong, regret or brokenness. It's feeling alone, betrayed, or hiding. It's harboring painful hurts, maybe feeling lost, dirty, or wrong, or unworthy and insecure. You see, understanding shame will help us see it for ourselves and recognize it in our lives. Almost no one can truly say that they have no shame. Brene Brown says that shame is universal. No one is exempt. I remember on my retreat recently that one of the ladies said to me, she said, I came on this retreat just to support you, but I figured out that I have some of this myself. And you see, it really is universal, and we have to understand it in order to get past it. Shame is often confused with words like humiliation, embarrassment, and guilt, but I want us to delineate between these. Humiliation and shame are often used interchangeably, but they are different. Humiliation is when someone has done something to you that you do not deserve. You see, people believe that they deserve their shame, not their humiliation. This can happen in a classroom, for example, or in an office setting. When a child or an employee is called out for not performing and made to look stupid or even called stupid in front of classmates or peers, then this person is humiliated. However, if this behavior happens repeatedly, then this student or this employee may turn this humiliation into shame and believe that they are bad. Now, embarrassment is the least of these. Embarrassment is fleeting, and it's usually eventually funny. We often find ourselves telling embarrassing stories to others later and laughing. And guilt, on the other hand, is the most often confused with shame. But the difference is that guilt says, I did something bad, whereas shame says, I am bad. When we look at shame versus guilt, we have to realize that shame is about who we are and guilt is about our behaviors. Self-talk from guilt might say, I should not have done that. That was really stupid. Shame self-talk says, I am stupid. You see, there's a big difference between these two statements. Brene Brown says that recognizing that we have made a mistake is far different from believing that we are a mistake. This definition is from Brene Brown's book, I Thought It Was Just Me. She says that shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of acceptance and belonging. So, what does shame sound like? Brene Brown says that listening to shame is difficult, experiencing shame is painful, but when we hear other people's experiences, it can be even more painful. See if you agree with these comments from interviews that she did in her research for this book. The participants said things like, shame is being rejected. You work hard to show the world what it wants to see, and shame is when your mask is pulled off and the unlikable parts of you are seen. It feels unbearable to be seen. Shame is hating yourself and understanding why others hate you too. Someone said shame is about self-loathing. Someone said shame is a prison, but it's a prison that you deserve to be in because something's wrong with you. Shame is being exposed, where the flawed parts of yourself that you want to hide from everyone are revealed, and you just want to hide or die. We see how shame shows up in the real life stories, but where did it show up in the biblical stories? When I was doing my research on this topic, I found many biblical stories of women and men that suffered shame and how God redeemed them as well. In the retreat, we spent one evening doing a biblical study on the many characters, including Adam and Eve, because shame started in the garden, and many other characters. But I wanted to highlight these four because these four women, Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba, are in the genealogy of Christ. If the restoration of these women doesn't show God's redemptive power over shame, then I don't know what does. I firmly believe that part of God's call on my life to this ministry is that we need to know and understand that we can overcome. Just like these women, God has purpose for our lives. God has redeemed many biblical characters, and He is still in the business today of redeeming us and bringing us out of shame in order that we can get to the other side and that we can start the process. Okay, so let's take a deep breath because this stuff has been difficult so far to hear what shame sounds like. So we're going to dive into shame and we're going to look at where shame comes from. This list pretty much encompasses a lot of what I have discovered. Shame comes from broken homes, alcoholic parents, abuse, molestation, performance pressures, conditional love, neglect, and feeling unwanted. So if we understand where shame comes from, the question would be, well, who uses shame? And this list is quite comprehensive. Shame is a tool that is used by almost everyone. It is used by parents, teachers, coaches, friends, employers, neighbors, preachers, and even the church and society in general. You see, people use shame because they don't know better. I learned in my research that God never uses shame to motivate us towards right living. He never withholds His love from us. Alan Wright is the author of Shame Off Me, and he reminds us in Genesis 1:28 that God blessed Adam and Eve before He expected or received anything from them. The scripture says, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply. You see, it shows us that shame was not So now that we kind of understand what shame is and where it comes from, let's look at some of what shame does. Shame breeds what Brene Brown calls unwanted identities. There are 12 categories of shame that emerge from her study, and I will give those to you shortly. But let me explain a little bit about what unwanted identities are and where they come from. You see, they come from our family of origin. These unwanted identities are placed on us by others, and they undermine our ideal self. I want to give you a few examples. One example comes from Brene Brown. One of her unwanted identities was that of being sick. You see, her family did not talk about sickness. It showed weakness in her eyes, and her parents were hardly ever sick. They were hard on themselves when they got sick, and they were hard on the children when they got sick. So when Brene Brown was pregnant with her son, she got very, very sick. She was bedridden for a while, and this devastated her. In her mind, this showed weakness. See, she had been reared to believe that sickness was weakness. So sickness was an unwanted identity for her. Now I want to share with you one of my unwanted identities. It was around the area of body image, which is the #1 researched area of unwanted identities from Brene Brown. You see, growing up, I was a chubby kid, and I was often shamed by myself and others as time went on. However, I didn't realize that then. I do now. You see, I even would call myself Old Fat Libby when I would enter the room. And I know that kind of sounds devastating, but you know what? I have realized that I guess it just made me seem cute and not really chubby. But fast forward to the 5th grade, I remember having to step on the scales in the cafeteria in the 5th grade, and I was over 100 pounds. You see, that was a lot in my days. I don't know what the average 5th grader weighs today, but at that time I was embarrassed and it kind of stuck with me. And later on, my parents encouraged me to diet when I was in high school, and it was always a yo-yo experience, as many people have also experienced. But you see, my mother had always kept her weight under control, and so this made the struggle more real. I really didn't realize at the time what was going on, but later in life, I realized that some insecurities came around the issue of body image. I always compensated with my personality, so this became one of my identities from my family of origin. So we have looked at what shame is and where it comes from, but before we look at resilience, let's look also at some of the effects of shame. Shame breeds many side effects, and we have already learned, and it can come from many different places as we have just discussed. Some of the side effects listed here are perfectionism, addictions, promiscuity, overeating, control issues, withdrawal, insecurities, and self-esteem issues, as well as a lack of self-worth and acceptance. These effects may hit each of us at different times and with different intensities, but chances are that most of us will have a touch of all of them. Dr. Mark Baker says in Overcoming Shame that the motivation for perfectionism is not the love of getting everything right. It is the fear of getting one thing wrong. We fear that someone will think that we are wrong or that we aren't enough. And it almost always goes back to being enough of something. You see, perfectionism is rooted in shame rather than being a way out of shame, because we value what other people think, and in reality, we can never live up to their expectations. But we lose ourselves in the struggle and in this trying to be perfect. But perfectionism can also be classified as an addiction, and addictions often take over people's lives due to shame. Addictions come in all shapes and sizes, from food addictions to drug and alcohol, to simple addictions that don't physically harm us, but they probably do mentally, like TV, Facebook, pornography, and others. The biggest problem with addictions is that they keep us in a shame spiral. You see, shame may initiate the addiction, but then the addiction brings on the shame, and the downward spiral is in full swing. Addictions. Another big area where shame shows up is in insecurities and self-esteem. When we struggle with insecurities and we lean toward perfectionism, then we have this perfect storm for shame. You see, when we actually mess up, and we will, then we begin to second guess ourselves. In Rising Strong, Brene Brown says that falling down, screwing up, and facing hurt can often lead to bouts of second guessing our judgment, our self-trust, and even our worthiness. I am enough can slowly turn to, am I enough? To counter that, she says that we need to begin to experience what she calls wholehearted living. Wholehearted living is engaging in our lives from a place of worthiness. It means cultivating the courage, compassion, and connection to wake up in the morning and think, no matter what gets done and how much is left undone, I am enough. It's also going to bed at night and thinking, yes, I am imperfect and vulnerable and sometimes afraid, but that doesn't change the truth that I am brave and worthy of love and belonging. If we don't get to the place where we begin to believe that we are worthy of love and belonging, then we will continue to hear and speak the negative self-talk to ourselves, and we will constantly beat ourselves up for little things, which actually shames us more. So there are 4 steps that you will need to begin to build resilience. And we're going to kind of walk through each one of these. The first one is recognizing shame by understanding your triggers, practicing critical awareness, reaching out to others, and speaking shame. So the first one is recognizing shame and understanding your triggers. If we're going to build resilience, then we have to begin by recognizing shame. That includes understanding how shame makes us feel and how we react to it and how do we identify these triggers. Figuring out our shame triggers, it's not altogether easy. Everyone is different, and we all come from different backgrounds and different family origins. You may have had an experience in the past that has caused you to feel shame, or maybe you were able to connect to something in your past. Like me and my weight and body image, maybe you have been able to make that connection. You see, when we are looking at our shame triggers, we must understand that we feel shame before we think it. Brené Brown says that women have described various physical reactions to shame, including stomach tightening, nausea, shaking, waves of heat in their faces and chests, wincing, and triggers of smallness. If we can recognize our physical responses, sometimes we can limit the powerlessness that we feel when we are in shame. And I mentioned that she says that these are the physical reactions that women experience. The majority of her research, and I thought it was just me, was around women and their shame issues, but Brené Brown also interviewed many men, and she found that many of these were very similar in nature for men and women alike. So we move on to the fact that shame floods us with strong emotions, and we often respond in a way that is even more shaming. For examples, emotions like fear and blame often show up when we are in a shaming situation. 2 things typically happen when we feel shame. We either act out or we shut down. Take, for example, a mother whose child is crying and acting out in a store, and then her credit card is denied at the checkout. You see, she is embarrassed and instantly feels shame. So what does she do? She takes it out on her child. We have probably all been there at some point. Then we feel worse, and that shame cycle begins. In order to understand our personal battle, we must identify our own triggers. I want to share with you an example of recognizing shame triggers from Brené Brown's book, I Thought It Was Just Me. I think this one speaks volumes, and so that's why I want to share it with you. You see, Sylvia, a young event planner, had worked 2 years for a company and had done a super job until she had a bad month. Her boss had a winner's board and a loser's board that he used for motivation. First of all, we note that that is not unable to function when her name showed up on the losers list. You see, she lost her confidence and fear took over. It wasn't until she was talking with her sister about this that she remembered her dad always praising them for being winners. They were on the track team, and he often spoke about how often no one likes a loser, and losers never change. This example is a true family of origin example. You see, Sylvia believed that you could not be a good runner and lose a race. Therefore, she translated this into, you cannot be good at your work and have a bad day or make a bad decision. You see how this reared its head many years after the initial impact. Now, when we learn to recognize our shame, then we are able to handle our reactions much better. Now I want to move on and share with you the 12 categories of shame that emerged from the research for I Thought It Was Just Me. These are appearance and body image, motherhood, family, parenting, money and work, mental and physical health, sex, aging, religion, being stereotyped and labeled, speaking out, and surviving trauma. Our shame triggers most likely will come from one of these areas. Wherever we are vulnerable, we are likely to have shame triggers. Now, when we are triggered, we will have a tendency to finish the story. You see, shame is about perception. It is also about perfection, but it is about perception. We often do this. We say things like, I don't want to be seen as blank, or I don't want people to think that I am blank, or I would even die if people thought blank about me. You see, these are examples of how other people see us. Shame comes from how we see ourselves through other people's eyes. We often put way too much value on what other people think, and we lose ourselves in this process as we work so hard to meet others' expectations. Now, I want to give you this formula that we use in the retreat of how to recognize shame triggers. We use this fill in the blank. I want to be perceived as blank, 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 and blank. And I do not want to be perceived as blank, 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 or blank. You see, for Sylvia, this might look like, I want to be perceived as strong, capable, confident, and a leader. I don't want to be perceived as weak, unsuccessful, unorganized, or a loser. After you fill in these statements, the next step would be to try to figure out the source of your triggers. You will ask yourself these questions. What do these perceptions mean to me? Why are they unwanted? And where did these messages that fuel these identities come from? Think back to Sylvia's story. The winner and loser dynamic is a shame trigger for her. The source of this trigger goes back to the enormous pressure that she was under from her father when she was a competitive athlete. So what do we learn from an exercise like this? A couple of things. First of all, we are very hard on ourselves, and we leave very little room for us to be human. We cannot deny the power of the messages that we have heard growing up. And thirdly, most of us judge others we perceive as having the traits that we dislike in ourselves. If we do not understand where these messages come from and become more aware of these triggers, then making a change to overcome shame is far out of reach. Now I want us to move on to practicing critical awareness. In order for us to go from fear, blame, and disconnection to courage, compassion, and connection, we will have to learn how to practice critical awareness. So you might ask yourself, what is critical awareness? This definition or idea comes from Brene Brown, and she says it's more than just knowing something exists. It's knowing why it exists, how it works, how our society is impacted by it, and who benefits from it. I want us to look at one of the universal shame triggers of appearance and body image, and we're going to look at these 4 questions. This is an exercise that was done by Brene Brown, and I thought it was just me, but I think it makes a good point and it's worth us looking at. So why? They exist to keep us spending our hard-earned money trying to achieve the unachievable. Note this fact that Americans spend more money each year on beauty than we do on education. So the second question that we look at is, how do these expectations work? Well, it's based on what we see on TV and magazines, of course, but it is more than that too. It is also what we don't see. Magazines and TV will tell us what we are supposed to look like, but if we don't see ourselves in the media, then we begin to think that we don't exist. If those images are invisible, well, then we must be invisible too. We know from the research that TV and all forms of media have a huge effect on shame. This was noted particularly for those under the age of 40. how TV is now setting the expectations and defining the unwanted identities. There is simply no way that we can live up to the images that we see on TV and in magazines, for that matter. Think of all the airbrushing that goes into these stars. I always tell people that if I had a personal chef, a personal trainer, a personal shopper, a personal hair and makeup artist at my disposal, that I could look like these women too. You see, it's just not realistic for us to expect this. 90% of the women interviewed suffered from body image and weight loss issues. So we look at the next question. How is our society influenced by these expectations? Well, the list goes on, but this is just a few of them. Number one, obesity and eating disorders. We notice that diets are starting at younger ages. Also, suicide attempts or thoughts of suicide have increased for girls who think they are overweight. And plastic surgery and other cosmetic procedures have increased 49% since 2003. This definitely is having an influence on our society. Well, then we look at the last question, who will benefit from these expectations? These numbers are astounding to me. The ones that benefit are the $38 billion hair industry, the $33 billion diet industry, the $24 billion skincare industry, $18 billion makeup industry, $15 billion perfume industry, and the $13 billion cosmetic industry. Friends, that's $141 billion in beauty, diet, and cosmetic industries. Certainly, this speaks loudly as to what this issue is doing to us these days. So I took the time to go through this exercise, and I want us to look at why this exercise is important. When we are looking at any of these triggers, these areas that affect shame, when we look at any of these areas, we will see that the big picture questions, we begin to develop critical awareness if we can see that big picture when we look at all those questions. We can better protect ourselves from falling prey to these unachievable expectations if we understand where they're coming from. And it helps us reality check our triggers using this awareness. To reality check our triggers, we will begin to make progress. So once we understand the big picture, we should reality check our unwanted identities, There are 6 reality check questions that Brene Brown suggests that we use when we are checking our unwanted identities. How realistic are my expectations? Can I be all things all the time to all people? Do the expectations conflict with each other? Am I describing who I want to be or who others want me to be? That is an extremely important one. If someone perceives me as having these unwanted identities, what will happen? And can I control how others perceive me? And how do I try? In the retreat setting, all these questions are worked on during your personal quiet time. This does not happen fast, and you should not be concerned if you are sitting there right now a little bit confused. This work takes time. And at the end of the webinar, I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond to the webinar, and I will send you this shame trigger worksheet as one of the free things that I'll send you. Spending some time in this area would highly benefit anyone who is struggling with this. So what happens when we practice this critical awareness? By seeing the big picture and putting things in context. When we're in shame, it's like we're using a zoom lens and we only see our struggle. And when we zoom out, we can actually see that others are right there with us. And then, secondly, you can realize that you are normal. You are not in this alone. Shame only works if we think that we are alone. And the third thing it does is it demystifies shame by exposing it and pulling the mask off. Now, if we don't practice these things, what will happen Well, unfortunately, we begin to individualize, and we believe that we are the only one that has this struggle. We begin believing that something is wrong with us, that we are not normal, and we believe that we should be ashamed. Now, that section was pretty difficult, and that's why I'm going to offer you that help at the end of the webinar for this understanding our triggers. The third section is reaching out. Once we recognize shame and we start to understand our triggers, and we practice this critical awareness, then reaching out, which is part 3, and speaking shame, which is part 4, are necessary if we want to see changes. When we have the courage to reach out to others and speak about our shame, then we force shame out of its hiding and we end the silence. Interestingly enough, when we reach out, we realize that these experiences that once made us feel alone actually are universal experiences. And when we reach out, we are increasing our resilience because connection is the #1 big benefit, and disconnection is proof that we are trapped in shame. But when we try to reach out, there are many barriers. One of the things that we do is we insulate ourselves from others. This is in an attempt to protect ourselves when in reality it is damaging to us because it is forcing us to be disconnected. Without connection, we are creating isolation. Insulating ourselves is like putting walls around us so that no one can get inside. Now, it is healthy to have boundaries, don't get me wrong. But walls that we put up that don't allow for anyone or anything to get in will also keep us from getting out. You see, loneliness and isolation are what feed this idea that we are not enough, which keeps us in the shame cycle. Reaching out takes great courage, and we must lean into this discomfort, which often leads to fear. And fear is another reason that we insulate. Friends, this stuff is difficult. And Brene Brown would say that this is why empathy comes into play. In her work, she realized that empathy was the strongest antidote to shame. Reaching out is not easy, but being able to receive empathy from others and being able to show empathy to others who are in a shameful scenario is important. There is a lot of power in hearing words when you are vulnerable enough to share your story with others. Hearing words like, "I understand, I've been there, that has happened to me, and it's okay, you're normal." But empathy is easier said than done. It's kind of easy to say the right words, but to really show empathy, you have to be in the feelings of the situation. So in order to be able to show empathy and receive empathy, we also have to know who we can reach out to. It takes so much courage for us to reach out, and it takes compassion to listen to someone who reaches out to us. Sharing our shame with someone is painful and it's a fearful experience. But on the flip side of that, listening to someone's story can be just as painful. In the retreat setting, I have participants take out their shame trigger worksheets and they spend some time trying to determine who they can reach out to for their shame triggers. When you begin to recognize your triggers, then you will know who you can reach out to. Sometimes you have to realize that the person you can talk to regarding one issue is not the same person that you'd go to regarding a different issue. You have to put boundaries into place. In order for you to determine who you can reach out to, there are 4 questions that you would consider. Who are the individuals or groups who form my connection network? Who reaches out to you with empathy and support? Who are the individuals and groups who form the shame web around these issues? And when you see people who are struggling with these same issues, do you reach out with empathy or do you insulate yourself? Reaching out is difficult, and speaking shame, which is part 4, is difficult. But in the research that I have done, I have heard more and more people say that when they can reach out And when they can share their story, that it really empowers them and it begins to free them. So I want us to look at speaking shame. Shame is a unique language, and it's hard for us to explain what shame feels like. We need a lot of trust to share our stories. Many times, instead of sharing, we shut down and we act out. The frustration that we feel when we are in a shaming situation can cause us to shut down and to act out in negative ways that we may feel embarrassed about later. People with a high level of shame resilience are able to express how they feel when they experience shame, and they have learned to ask for help when they need it. Let me give you a little personal example. Since my mother's death, I have been in charge of filling my dad's pill container each week. And a few months ago, I forgot to include one of his pills. He had called me on that Monday and asked about that pill, and I told him where it was. My assumption was that he had added it to his pill container. Anyway, at church on Sunday, he mentioned this to me, and he said that I should not forget that pill. And it was during this conversation that I realized that he didn't actually add it to his pill container. And I told him, I thought we agreed that you were going to take care of that. And he gave me a hard time, and he said, and I said to him, Dad, you have to give me a little grace. And he came back with, no, I don't. You have to take care of me. Well, I don't recall exactly what my comment was at that time because I don't like confrontation. I probably just said something like, right. But anyway, I did find that I was upset with him. I don't think he should have said something like that to me. But in my mind, I was saying, I messed up. I'm not a perfect daughter. I could have done better. But you see, as a survivor of shame and someone who has worked through this, as soon as those thoughts came to me, I did exactly what I was supposed to do. I looked at this in the right context, and I thought, my dad is just being who he is. He has no idea what kind of stress that I've been under. He should appreciate me more. These thoughts are the thoughts of someone who has good shame resilience. I went right to the car and told my husband about this because doing that gave me great support because he sees everything that I do. You see, I got the support that I needed because I reached out, and I came away recognizing the imperfections in my dad, not in myself. Friends, speaking shame silences it. Shaming comments can hurt us. They send us looking for protection. Sometimes that protection comes through reaching out and sharing our stories. Shaming comments can be intentional, direct or indirect, manipulative, and possibly unintentional. Such as my dad's comments, they may have been indirect, or they may have been a little manipulative, or they could have been unintentional altogether. But they are often about how we look, how we work, our parenting, how we spend our money, and even some family experiences that we have no control over. You see, appearance, work, and parenting are some of the top shame triggers. But speaking shame truly silences it. It builds resilience. Although I do want to offer a word of caution here. There is such a thing as a vulnerability hangover. When we are sharing our shame, a few hours or a few days later, you might think, oh my gosh, did I just tell her all that? Who is she going to tell? What was I thinking? This is normal and it's universal. The caution is that we must feel the sense of trust before we can share. Brene Brown says that most of us have turned to people we barely know and thrown up vulnerability all over them. So let me give you a technique for speaking shame that's a little safer than that. It's hard for us to let ourselves be seen if we are fearful of what others might think. In the retreat, we take the time to do some journaling about our shame. Brene calls this the SFD, which stands for several things, but the safe one is the stormy first draft. This is the idea that when we begin to feel shame, we should write about it. It's a whole lot safer to write down your feelings than to verbally puke on someone who has hurt you. This is something I would highly recommend. Many of you may have used this technique or a technique similar to this for other reasons. Writing our feelings and thoughts is used in many different areas. So now that we've covered these 4 areas, I want us to look at what it takes to overcome shame. In my opinion, and from personal experience, I have discovered that it takes four things: speaking shame, which we have talked about, listening to the Holy Spirit's conviction, renewing your mind, and forgiveness. Now, speaking shame was this fourth part, but as Christians, I believe that we must add these other three parts. So, listening to the Holy Spirit conviction is so important when it comes to shame. We can allow Satan to get the best of us if we see everything as a shaming scenario. But you see, conviction is God getting your attention, and shame is the enemy getting your attention. Without conviction of the Holy Spirit, we do not change or grow. Sadly, many Christians are confused about shame and conviction. Shame binds us and tears away at our souls, but conviction heals us and frees us. This is as simple as learning the voice of Satan and the voice of God. You see, according to Alan Wright, who wrote Shame Off Me, Satan uses shame to separate us from God and create distance between us. And God uses conviction to bring us closer to Him. God will never use shame to motivate us to live right, nor does He motivate us by withholding His love. We've already seen in Genesis 1:28 that God blessed Adam and Eve and commanded them to be fruitful and multiply before they ever messed up. He does not use shame to get our attention. He uses love and godly conviction. And the third step is renewing your mind. Mark Baker, who's the author of Overcoming Shame, says, to overcome shame, you cannot just do something different. You must be something different. You must experience the renewing of your mind. This is based from Romans 12:2, which says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Baker says that shame proneness is the result of unconscious beliefs about ourselves. Unfortunately, these unconscious beliefs cannot be removed because they have created their own neuro pathways in the brain. However, don't be discouraged. They can be overpowered by positive new neuro pathways that contradict the old ones. This process is what is called renewing your mind. And this took me over a year to truly see results and to believe these new truths. These unconscious beliefs are what we call shame language, and they are the lies that haunt us. And we dwell on them and we feed off of them and we believe them. Shame language will hide your true identity. It can look like constantly putting yourself down or thinking that you are not enough. These thoughts of your mind can impact your spiritual, emotional, and physical health. So we must choose to change them. We must stop believing the lies and instead believe that we can change the neuro pathways of our brain with the truth of the Word of God. And here is exactly what that looked like for me. I used an exercise in the retreat that I was introduced to years ago, which replaces your false identity with the truth that is found in Scripture. This is not a quick fix. I read these note cards every day for over a year. I carried them with me on vacation. They went everywhere, and they still sit beside my couch for a quick reminder. So after we renew our minds, our last step in overcoming shame would be forgiveness of shame. Now, I will say that none of these steps are linear. They can go in any direction that you choose. But forgiveness, in order to overcome shame, is part of the process. You must choose to forgive because the truth is that the people who have hurt you or shamed you or abandoned you may never recognize the error of their ways, and certainly they will not recognize the hurt that they have caused you. But breaking free from the cycle of shame can only happen if we allow repentance to replace bitterness. As difficult as forgiveness is, it will only keep us bitter to hang on to it. If bitterness has a hold on you, the person, but it may destroy you, causing heartache and sickness. Note that the word in the middle of forgiveness is give. Forgiveness requires a person to give, even if the other person doesn't reciprocate. To give up hurt that you want to hold on to give up the right to make the other person pay, to give up the bad attitude and the bad mouthing of the person who hurt you. Marilyn Holtz wrote in her book, Shame Lifter, that forgiveness involves much humility and dying to self. We have to choose to let go of the things that bother us. It is an opportunity to live out Ephesians 4:2, which says, be humble and gentle, be patient with each other, making allowances for each other's faults because of your love. C.H. Spurgeon said, to be forgiven is such sweetness that honey is tasteless in comparison with it. But yet there is one thing sweeter, and that is to forgive. Think about this. If Jesus was with you during your most difficult times, then we can forgive because he provided that way through the cross. Hebrews 12:1-2 says, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the sake of the joy that was set before him endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God. Think about this. When Jesus took on the weight of your sin and carried it to the cross, he also carried the sins committed against you. When you insist on holding on to the hurts that were inflicted on you, you deny the power of his crucifixion. This is a quote from Jennifer Kennedy Dean in He Leads Me Beside Still Water. I think this is a powerful statement that speaks volumes to overcoming shame. So, what are your next steps? Well, friends, this has been a lot of material for a short period of time. Obviously, this 45-minute training is a 30,000-foot view of a 3-day retreat, and there is much more that must be done to truly overcome shame. There are individual worksheets and exercises that I use in the retreat that would be beneficial for anyone who is sensing that they need more. So you can do a couple of things. The first one is to send me an evaluation of this webinar to Libby at libbyljohnson.com and tell me 3 suggestions that would have made it better for you, and I will send you 3 free tools. One of those I mentioned already is the Shame Trigger Exercise Worksheet. I will also send you a forgiveness exercise, and I will send you this PowerPoint slides if you would like them. The second thing that you can do is help me to book retreats. I would love to do this retreat for your group. You see, I have a desire to reach 150 to 200 people with this message of hope during 2020. I'm looking for partners to come along beside me with this life-changing teaching, and get it out there. I have several spots open for 2020, and I would ask that if you're interested for your group to please contact me. The third thing that you can do is that if you're interested in partnering with me, you can schedule a time to chat with me, and I'll send you a packet with everything you need to know to book and carry out a retreat. You can schedule this through my email or my website, which is coming up in a second. I want you to know that I will come alongside retreat leaders. If you've never done this work, then don't worry. I will be with you and walk very closely with you through this process. And I also want to let you know that I do this material one-on-one. If this has piqued your desire and that's what you need, then reach out to me as well. My contact information is here on the slide. You can reach me through my email, Libby at libbyljohnson.com, or you can schedule a 30-minute free discovery call through my website. This discovery call could be for one-on-one coaching through this process, or it could be to learn more about what this might look like in a retreat setting. So, I have given you a couple of ideas that you can follow up with. And we also have offered slides And any of these books could greatly benefit anyone. But if you would like to know what might work for you, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to have that conversation. So at this point, we'll move into a time of questions. And Rick is going to be handling the questions for us.
Thank you so much, Libby, for sharing and for your vulnerability as you have shared your story or several stories about your experience with this. And we do have a couple of questions. While I'm preparing to ask those, I'll remind our participants, if you have questions or comments that you would like to make, then please just put them in the question and answer box. It's at the bottom of your screen. It just says Q&A. You can click on that, and then we'll ask Libby your questions. Libby, one question is, how might addressing shame help me with forgiveness of myself and of others?
Well, that's a great question, Rick. Thank you. Well, I think forgiveness is one of the key points here. And if we, first of all, don't understand where the shame is coming from for ourselves, then it's very difficult for us to even begin to forgive ourselves. Often we think that shame is our fault. And what we learn from this is that shame is not our fault. Guilt is our fault. Those are the things we can be guilty about. Shame is something that's been done to us. So once we go through the process and we understand more about shame and where it comes from, then it kind of frees us to be able to forgive ourselves as well as forgiving others. Unfortunately, we have to forgive others as we go through the process in order to release that bitterness. And I have talked to many people and seen many cases where bitterness has just eaten away at people. So forgiveness is a key factor in this whole process. So I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. Yeah, and participant, if you would like some more clarification or more on that, then just type in another question.
Sure.
But thank you, Libby. Do women have more difficulty dealing with shame than men?
Yes. Very simply, the answer to that is yes. But I will say that what I've learned through the research, several of the books that I read were actually written by men. And men suffer with shame in many ways. They suffer with shame in different ways. I think women carry it a little closer to their heart than men do. For men, it's more of weakness is one of their biggest triggers. To not be able to do something, to not be able to complete something, to feel like they have let somebody down is the biggest shame trigger for men that Brene Brown found in her research. And she gives a lot of wonderful stories in some of her books. But women carry shame closer to their hearts, and I think we live it more because it walks with us closer. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I think so. I know you did mention that for women, the body image is a big part of that, and maybe it is for men too. But you did mention in particular for women that was an issue.
It affected 90% of those that Brene Brown interviewed. Yeah.
All right, and we got a response that of thanks. Forgiveness is something this person says that I'm particularly interested in and struggling with at the present time, and the response regarding bitterness was helpful.
Good, thank you.
Those are the questions that we have, and I want to thank you so much for, again, sharing from your research and your personal experience. Libby, thank you so much. And again, this is recorded, and we will have the bibliography that was on the slide. We'll have that with this as well. And then you've seen, participants, you've seen Libby's contact information. And so if you would like to talk with her further, or again, invite her to lead this type of retreat with a group that you're involved in, I know she'd be happy to do that. Thank you so much, Libby, and thank you, our participants, for joining us.
All right. Thank you so much, Rick. I appreciate this opportunity.
You're welcome.